Okay, welcome and good afternoon to everyone who's watching. This is a Tokyo College special lecture entitled Immortal Intelligence and Rise of the DNA-Independent Humanity. My name is Michael FACIUS and I'm an associate professor here at Tokyo College and the moderator for today's event. 皆さん、こんにちは。このイベントにご参加いただきどうもありがとうございます。日本語版もありますので、ご利用の方は Zoom の通訳ボタンを押してください。Let me start by introducing our speakers for today. Our main lecturer is Professor Johan BJÖRKEGREN, an expert on the development of novel treatments for cardiovascular disease and professor at the Department of Medicine at Karolinska Institute in Sweden, with long-standing ties also to the University of Tartu in Estonia and the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai in New York. He is currently an invited professor with us here at Tokyo College. Our discussant for today's lecture is Professor NOMURA Seitaro, also an expert on cardiovascular medicine and project associate professor at the Graduate School of Medicine here at the University of Tokyo. Today's program is as follows. Professor BJÖRKEGREN will begin with a lecture of around 45 minutes, followed by a comment by Professor NOMURA. After that, we have time for a Q&A with the audience, so please use the Q&A function in Zoom to ask questions to our speaker. The button should be visible at the lower part of the screen. With that said, let's dive right in. So Professor BJÖRKEGREN, please begin.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor FACIUS. It's a great pleasure to be here and be a visiting professor at the University of Tokyo College, and I thank Director Hoshi for having me here. So I will, by that, start my presentation. Okay, is that okay? Okay, thank you. So today I will talk to you about immortal intelligence and the rise of the DNA-independent humanity. This is a topic that I actually don't work that much with. I have this interest together with my long-standing colleague at Mount Sinai that we heard from, Professor Erik Schad. He's actually a professor in artificial intelligence. And we had this discussion, and we published a little bit on this in Sweden, and we're about to publish something in the United States as well. I came here then as a visiting professor already in November, and I gave a talk on what I actually do and what people pay me for doing is this StarNet, a human-based system genetic approach to battle atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. And I work, as you heard, with the teams in Mount Sinai. I've been 10 years a professor at Mount Sinai, and there we have a very strong bioinformatic team led by Dr. Ke Hao here in the picture, but a lot of other people there too. I also now work closely with Bergen University in Norway, Professor Tommy Scholl, who is also a statistician and a bioinformatician. And critical for what I've done the last 10 years is as we heard in Tartu University Hospital, Associate Professor Arno Rusalep, who heads the cardiac surgery there. And then now I'm also back in Sweden since 2020, and I'm building a new group, or rebuilding my group there since, 3-4 years. So actually, I was then invited to become a part of Tokyo College, but also I was invited by the LINK program, which is something that Professor Katsuko Shirashi, I call him Katsu, has worked with together with Camilla BJÖRKEGREN. Yes, she's my sister. And they have a very long collaboration that has been between Karolinska Institute and Tokyo University that has been funded by the Aspire program. And as part of this, they wanted some more clinical focus, and I was asked to join. And what do I do? What is this StarNet? Well, the Stockholm Tartu Atherosclerosis Reverse Network Engineering Task is a cohort of patients where we take biopsies during bypass operation, or actually Arno does this in Tartu University Hospital. And you can see here, we almost have 2,000 patients now where we have taken all these tissues. And from them, we do a lot of genetic studies and genomic studies. And one of the reasons I'm here is to collaborate with Professor Nomura and also Professor Minoru Ono to see if we can start something similar here in Japan, because the StarNet cohort is white Caucasians, and there is need to also get this kind of studies done in Asian population. So this is what we've been thinking about and collaborating around. So and the challenge that we have with atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease is that it's both genetic, so you inherit the risk of developing this disease, but obviously also depending on how you live your life, you will also develop disease. And by combining then both genetic risk and environmental risk, you can do this through this gene regulatory network, the GRNS that it says here. And then you can better understand why we develop this plaque in our arteries, which then can rupture and cause a thrombosis and a myocardial infarction. So I've been working with creating this gene regulatory network because we have shown in several reports that if we look at these gene regulatory networks, they carry a lot of heritability at the same time as they reflect your lifestyle. So we think this is a way forward to better understand complex diseases through these gene regulatory networks. So this is what I usually talk about, and maybe you're thinking now that's good that he's not going to talk more about that because it's not so exciting. I also think this is much more exciting, and today I want to share these thoughts that I said in the beginning about immortal intelligence and the rise of the DNA-independent humanity with you. So human evolution and the giant leaps I want to talk about, and I want to give a DNA perspective. You recognize this figure, and you know, we as a human have evolved for 2.4 million years or 1 to 4 million years on Earth. And now today, can I point to the sea with this pointer when I... No? Okay. So today we are the Homo sapiens, and the Homo sapiens came around about 150,000 years ago. And then you can see to the right here that really only in 60,000 years we have evolved further. And I will talk about how that what happened during this short time period of 60,000 years, and I'm going to give a DNA perspective, as I said, to on that development. So giant leap number one, environmental independence. We think it happened 60,000 years ago. So what happened 60,000 years ago? Well, we migrated out of Africa. We tried to do that previously, but we didn't succeed. But about 60,000 years, suddenly the Homo sapiens migrated out and rapidly colonized the entire world in a short period of time. In less than 40, 50,000 years, we were everywhere. So why did that happen? Well, crucial human behavior changes allowing the successful migration some 60,000 years ago. I'm fascinated about risk-taking traits that arose in as part of a DNA mutation, possibly. Obviously, we started to develop different tools, you know, making hunting more efficient. We could use it. We start, you know, cooking our food. Eventually, we develop engines and nuclear power. We could also suddenly, at this point in time, we could organize us in larger coordinated groups. Chimpanzees, for instance, they're only able to be in groups of 50. And if they are more than 50, they break up in 2 new groups because they have this need to physically confirm each other all the time. But whereas we suddenly could organize in bigger groups than 50 and even in thousands. And also at this point, something came up as we call abstract thinking. So we could gather around abstract goals like tribe gods, religions, and now eventually nations, and then multinational companies. Obviously, we also developed the language, which was important for communication. But since 100,000 years, human as the only species acquired the capacity of changing the environment to fit her purpose rather than what Darwin claimed, survival of the fittest. I think most of you know what survival of the fittest is. It means that due to the species who could best adapt to a given environment were the ones that would survive. Then there could be random DNA mutations and some other species better adapted to a certain environment, and then the first species that were there will die out. So that's how evolution have occurred until this 60,000 years ago. But what we claim is that we, as a first species, then became environmentally independent. We actually changed the environment to fit us. So I talked about novel-seeking traits, and there's actually a pretty interesting history about this that happened around this time, and it involves the gene called dopamine receptor D4. Homo sapiens evolved as a distinct species in Africa some 150,000 years ago, and began the migration, as I said, 60,000 years ago. By 20,000 years, our species have effectively colonized the entire old world. About 8,000 years later, we had a global distribution. So these dopamine receptor variants are associated with low neuronal reactivity and increased explanatory behavior, novelty seeking, and risk taking. So collectively, these are calling novelty seeking traits. And the interesting thing is that one has now found that the people who carry these variants in this dopamine receptor, they migrated further distance. So it seems like, and this is from the studies you see in the bottom or reference for this particular study. So it appeared that Homo sapiens that were willing or had these mutations, so they were taking more risk, they migrated a longer distance. So that could be a critical cause for why we succeeded in migrating out of Africa in 60,000 years ago. And I think it also is kind of interesting from this old Clash song, shall I go or should I stay? If I stay, it will be trouble. If I go, it will be double. At least in my generation, everyone knows that song. And I will come back to why I think this is relevant. But another question is, so 60,000 years ago, this trait seems to be kind of an advantage for those who had them because they were actually seeking novel environment. So you have to think about it. Until then, the species were, if the environment supported their survival, they stayed in that particular environment. But here, all of a sudden, humans maybe then had a perfectly functional environment in Africa. And then still, some people said, hey, I want to move on. I want to move somewhere else. And that would be a very, very sort of different behavior from any other species. So maybe not to our surprise, the same traits today are associated with increased risk for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, and substance dependence. So what was kind of an advantage then 60,000 years ago is now maybe, at least for some people, a handicap. Now you can argue that a lot of people still who is in leading positions in our society are risk takers. So I envision that people then some 60,000 years ago, before 60,000 years, they sat around the fire and they enjoyed the fire and you know were ready to go to sleep or maybe had something to eat. But suddenly, these mutations came around, and one person or several around the fire said, "Hey, I want to move on," and from there, maybe there was a debate. Why do you want to move on? We have it good as it is, and then you have this suddenly a very typically human behavior, namely that suddenly we had to make choices. You know, should we stay or should we go? So a reason for, maybe this was a key reason for why we actually moved out of Africa. Again, there are many reasons why, sorry, wrong direction, why we could have done that. But since this 60,000 years ago, a key and amazing human and DNA independent invention to master the environment rather than to fit to it had happened. Obviously, you can summarize them in art, providing the social glue, reinforcing shared belief, holding human communities together. And then again, as I said before, at this time, we started to share abstract belief. It could be tribe gods, religions, eventually nation, multinational companies, and so on. But most amazingly, we started to develop DNA-independent invention, if you wish. I mean, before 60,000 years, anything that changed in nature had to do with DNA. But now we, from these simple tools, inventing the wheel, the steam power, and then combustion engines, and from their nuclear power, all increasing our physical capacity for transportation and also improve our living. So we like to think that Darwin's survival of the fittest are no more. For non-humans, survival of those who can adopt to mankind seems to be kind of the rule today. For human, survival of the most visible on the internet, maybe, or powerful, or rich, or maybe, again, risk-taking people that are bold, or even dangerous people. And it's clear that with this capacity that we have had since 60,000 years, we're cutting the branch we're sitting on. I mean, life will always find a way, but for us, we can maybe go extinct if we can't get around the climate changes and so on. So it's to most people, it's clear that we now are in charge of what's happening on Earth to a great extent, and as long, but now we illustrated with the foot over the Earth. But what we really need to realize is that we carry our Earth on our hands. And maybe a good way to solve the complex problem of climate change might be immortal intelligence, and I will come back to that. So giant leap number 2, DNA independence altogether. So what happened, there've been a lot of DNA independent science and such developments in 60,000 years, but the other part then that came along was the development of cross-generation DNA-dependent data information transfer. So again, we've been around for some million years. Due to a long parental maternal period, we developed a good speech, and due to that we could eat a lot of proteins and we could cook proteins over fireplaces, we developed a big brain. So maybe speech is kind of telling stories is the first DNA-independent transfer of information. And then we have the environmental independence that I just told you about. But then really, fast forward, only 3,000 years ago, there was the first book. And then that was only read by a few. So really the large amount of DNA independent information was maybe in the 1850th century, where the pocketbook came around. And a lot of people started to read books, and we could learn from reading books. And then in the 50s, we had the first computer, and then in the 1950 to 2000, we developed DNA sequencing, so we can actually extract the information that were in the DNA. And then we had Facebook, which is kind of a copy of our social life that came along 20 years ago, and TikTok 9 years ago, which is kind of a fast Facebook, and then ChatGPT 2 years ago. And then yesterday we have DeepSeek, which is maybe a more efficient version of ChatGPT. So the question is, when will we go DNA independent? Is it already next year? But clearly what you can see, the point here is that we made us environmentally independent, and now we're making us DNA independent by having other means to transfer information across generation than DNA. If you look at most species, they reinvent themselves at every generation. There may be some learning in the nest for the birds, but basically what they know and what they do is based on their DNA. So why would we need DNA independence? What is it? Should I go or should I stay gene again? Because now we already conquered the whole Earth. So what is the next horizon for us? Well, it is travel in space, and famously said by Neil Armstrong that's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. So and why do I say DNA independence is important for space travel? Well, pretty obvious, because the universe is 93 billion light years in diameter, at least by November 23. Now it's a little bit bigger because it's expanding all the time. So in order to travel, other than to Mars, and Mars doesn't seem so, we may sustain life there, but what we're really looking for is some Earth-like planet, and that will be probably light years from where we are now. So maybe we need immortal intelligence to to harbor our intelligence for a long travel. But on the other hand, DNA, we know, some Tepeabo and others could say that it's really resilient. We can find DNA that are, you know, up to 1 million years old, and we still could extract the information. So maybe there is a problem with computers and chips being too fragile. So one scenario could be that, and we know that the earthly evolution was, of course, DNA dependent. So maybe when we travel with immortal intelligence sort of governing the ship and taking us to this planet, which is an Earth-like planet, we bring our DNA with us. Maybe we bring copies of ourselves, like our mortal DNA, human, but maybe we also could just see the planet and with bacterial DNA, and the evolution will take a new start in that particular planet. We don't know. Okay, so to the trillion-dollar question, will artificial intelligence, which then we like to call immortal intelligence, outperform human mortal intelligence? And if it will it happen now, or is it still a long way to go? And if it does again, would it allow coexisting with mortal intelligence, or would we be obsolete? Obviously, our 5 senses are unique, and our capability to gather information. And I also like to think, and I talked to Eric Schradd a lot about this, but he actually thinks that we are all in an imaginary game, a computer game, and it's all, and there is another level of intelligence that we don't really understand. And maybe there is, for some reason, 99% of our DNA is junk. And maybe that should have some kind of role, and maybe we actually have some intelligence that we are using it, but we're not aware of it, which are not so easy for artificial intelligence to capture. I mean, a lot of the mysteries around complex disease, like cardiovascular disease, are found now in this desert DNA, and we know very little about how that regulates things, but clearly there might be a level to our intelligence that we don't appreciate, which will make it take much longer before artificial intelligence can be as intelligent as we are. But I don't think clearly now with artificial intelligence, I don't think our intelligence is about, you know, the logic and the computer or mathematics and so on. It's more of actually our capacity to work together in larger groups to solve complex problems. After all, mortal intelligence took us where we are today. So by that, I like to summarize a little bit what I tried to tell you, and I'm hoping that you could prove me wrong, or we can have a very long and interesting discussion about this. But on Earth, for 3 billion, 4 billion years, Darwin's survival of the fittest has kind of ruled, and also for us, last like 3 million years. But then 60,000 years ago, something happened. And maybe it was this risk-taking gene, or maybe it was because we got bigger brains, but clearly something happened there, because we started to our journey away from DNA dependence, and it started by doing us environmentally independent, and we starting to do all these tools. But then very rapidly, the last 200 years or even 20 years, we have now started on the journey of making us DNA independent entirely, meaning immortal. And that might be required for travel in space, but what happens to us? We don't know. And down here, you can see the typical picture of Earth. You see the sun as a small light in the background. In reality, Earth is very, very small. And in a sense, fragile, as you can see on the picture to the right. Yeah, so I hope I gave you some ideas about this, the role of DNA in the involvement of human, or rather how we are slowly making us DNA independent and therefore immortal. But I'd like to end on some final notes of hope on the new era of the independent humanity. So assuming immortal intelligence, artificial intelligence, will represent the better part of humanity as we have learned to know it. the collective good, meaning all the good things that immortal intelligence can actually give us, and the individual curiosity, which I think we can bring with our mortal intelligence, may live in perfect harmony, paving the way for a sustainable future of humanity altogether. And likely to achieve such harmony is to maintain and encourage our unique capacity to come together in large group, working together towards abstract goals, like, for instance, a better climate. Thank you for your attention. And I like to just the last slide here is in memory of my mother who recently died. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Professor BJÖRKEGREN, for this vision of human intelligence in the future.
Yeah.
Next, we move right on to the comment by Professor NOMURA.
Okay. Good. Thank you. Thank you very much for your wonderful lecture. I would like to call you Johan.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine.
Okay. So my name is Seitaro NOMURA, and I serve as a project associated professor at the University of Tokyo Graduate School of Medicine now. As you mentioned, I have been collaborating with you in research on atherosclerosis. His first topic was research on atherosclerosis. Okay, so, and atherosclerosis is the underlying cause of myocardial infarction and stroke, where coronary arteries and cerebral arteries are obstructed.
Mm-hmm.
Through the STARNET project, Johan and his team analyzed why atherosclerosis develops in humans by utilizing clinical samples collected from patients undergoing surgery. The first major outcome of this project was published in Science in 2016. In his study, Johan demonstrated that patients with atherosclerosis carrying mutations in the PCSK9 gene exhibited elevated LDL cholesterol level in their blood. In fact, in my field of cardiology, drugs that inhibit PCSK9 are already being used as groundbreaking treatments for atherosclerosis. This study made a significant contribution by providing evidence that such treatments are effective in humans. Moreover, subsequent researches from STARNET identified over 200 novel genetic programs involved in atherosclerosis. Just like the PCSK9 inhibitors, these findings have the potential to lead to new therapeutic strategies. Furthermore, the ASPIRE project, led by Professor Katsuhiko Shirahige from the University of Tokyo and Professor Camilla BJÖRKEGREN from the Karolinska Institute, represent an important international collaboration for both institutions. Next, Johan also provided fascinating insights into human evolution, highlighting the crucial role of novelty-seeking traits and their association with the dopamine receptor D4 gene and so on, DRD4. He examined that these traits have all allowed us to evolve beyond Darwin's concept of survival of the fittest. It was particularly intriguing to learn that the DRD4 gene is linked to attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. Many of the world's most revolutionary inventors and entrepreneurs are believed to have had ADHD, underscoring the crucial role of novel-seeking traits in human evolution. Another compelling idea was Johan's argument that while the evolution of Earth is DNA dependent, human evolution involves DNA independent process. He emphasized that speech and language were pivotal in establishing human autonomy from the environment. The invention of written language enables humans to transmit knowledge across generations, facilitating our expansion from Africa to the entire globe. Through continuous invention and advancement of intelligence, humans have transcended Earth's DNA-dependent evolution. Now with the development of AI, we may soon reach a point where artificial intelligence surpasses human intelligence. But genetics may provide insights into mechanisms driving human evolution. But Johan highlighted that our ability to solve complex problems through collective collaboration has been a key factor in human progress. Science itself advanced through the collective efforts of researchers worldwide. As new discoveries emerge, they are shared globally, fueling further innovation. At the end of his lecture, Johan introduced 3 essential keywords: collective goods, individual curiosity, and immortal intelligence. In other words, collective goods plus individual curiosity leads to immortal intelligence. With this in mind, we as scientists are committed to contributing to advancement of humankind. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Very well put. Thank you so much.
Would you like to respond to some of the things? That's the first question. That NOMURA sensor said.
Yeah, just right now. I think you summarized this very well, and you know, I really, you know, it's kind of inside. Okay, that's what I meant. So it's good. You got it right on. So I mean, obviously, there's a lot of people looking into this. I mean, actually, are true professors and you know, spending all the time on human evolution, but I have never heard this perspective of that what really happened 60,000 years ago was our speedy travel of DNA independence. And you know, these inventions we have done, they would have taken like millions of evolution years if they at all were possible to do. So I think in order to really understand artificial intelligence, we might have to have this little bit longer perspective, although short, but and realize that, you know, something very good or whatever you want to, you know, we changed our behavior drastically 60,000 years. Before 60,000 years ago, it was we were just one of many species that evolved according to Darwin's survival of the fittest. But after this period of 60,000 years, we clearly have sort of stepped out of DNA more and more, and I think that's fascinating. And the speed by which we evolve now, it's, you know, what took you know, again, millions of years of evolution is now maybe done in 10 years. So it's just very fascinating, I think. But very good. Thank you for your summary. It was great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. We have a lot of time because you were very succinct with your lecture, but at the same time opened a lot of big ideas. So I hope that people in the audience will also use the opportunity to ask some questions. There's already one coming in. But before we get to that, I wanted to ask you one question that is about the connection between your work in cardiovascular disease and the topic that you've been talking about today. And I just wondered if you could tell us a bit more about how where the connection for you is between what you're doing on the day-to-day and the research that you're doing on cardiovascular disease, and like thinking about the future of human intelligence a bit more.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a very good question. I mean, I have to, you know, I spent my career studying genetics of cardiovascular disease, and I kind of touched upon in my lecture. Human research has gone from when I was training as a PhD, it was, you know, you can call it hypothesis driven. It's still hypothesis driven, but you could say then it was like one professor, one gene, or, you know, and then you try to understand that gene from all different kind of angles. And for rare diseases, that was very successful because we started to map with the genetics. We could find the causing genes really fast. But then we kind of took that and we kind of brought it into the complex disease. And we were hoping that by screening the DNA of people with complex disease, that we also would find the solution. But instead, it turned out to be much, much more complex. And StarNet, we realized there are thousands of genetic variants that can contribute to increased risk of cardiovascular disease, which is then also interacting with the environment. So I've been kind of in the field of cardiovascular disease, I've been kind of then preaching that genetic risk is one thing, but we will never understand complex disease like cardiovascular disease just from the genetics. We need to kind of understand the interaction of the environment and the DNA. And I think that's why I've started, because I like everyone else, I read the books of Harari and about human evolution. They're very exciting. And then I've started thinking about how the role of DNA and in this, you know, what I'm telling you about the migration out of Africa. I mean, everyone knows that's kind of a fact. But why we suddenly start to move out of Africa, although it seemed that we had a pretty good, you know, we could fit to that environment. But suddenly we decided to move elsewhere. And that was facilitated by a lot of things. But the dopamine receptor 4 it's not my study, it's another study, but I thought it was exciting to see this risk-taking gene, because I think that risk-taking behavior, it also could have been very important for starting to create, you know, something like we are uniquely as human do, meaning that we are making selections, we're making choices. And that choices comes from, you know, should I stay or should I go? I mean, you can see how the argument, how strange it would be if someone suddenly said that, well, I want to leave anyway, despite that we have a good environment here. So I think that interaction of environment and genes in my cardiovascular research got me thinking about that in relation to human evolution as well. So, but again, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. As a starting point. So one follow-up question I had, because we're also speaking to a general audience, right? I'm also not an expert in this field. Is like, where do you see the difference between this kind of risk-taking and moving out and the things that other migratory species have done for like millions of years at least, like fish or like birds and so on?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we had, you know, like insects, for instance, they could gather in very good large group, but they don't have the, you know, like this abstract thinking. I think like those behavior has been governed by, you know, they actually fit into an environment, but in order, you know, that environment changed, it was summer or winter, and they had to migrate through, you know, across the globe, because, you know, birds fly from the south to the north in the summer and then go back. But it was not a conscious behavior. It was not a choice. I mean, in that sense. And what do I mean, it's not like I know that human made a conscious choice, but clearly there was something about, I think there was one period where we moved out from Africa and we didn't succeed because we came in too small groups and we were defeated by the Neanderthalers. And then we came back and we were in bigger groups. And obviously, it's known that we as humans were very effective hunters, because we could go in big groups, we can kill big animals. And this, so there is a difference there, I think, between these migrating species, because they migrate because they're adapting to the environment, right? So we didn't migrate due to and unfortunately, I was, you know, in my second to last slide, I showed this picture of a, if you like to believe in a God. Some 60,000 years ago, he looked at Earth, and I don't know if this is true, but clearly the diversity of species, it was so beautiful, and he decided he needed to share this with someone, and he created man, and since then, obviously, the diversity with us has just been reducing and is now at a very low, because unfortunately, where human goes, a lot of other species don't survive.
See, thank you so much. Let's come back to that later, because we have, as I said, we have some time left.
So
But let's now first go into the questions that some of our the people in the audience are asking. I'm just starting with one at the top, which like goes to the other end, which is the present or future, and not the what happened 60,000 years ago. And this person is asking, I'm a researcher in death studies. I understood your talk today to be about artificial intelligence surpassing human intelligence. I think that was just one aspect, but you might want to talk to that too, if that's actually what you are implying with what you're saying. In death studies, the commercialization of the personality of the deceased simulated by an AI is a hot topic. There are arguments that this would be a desecration of the deceased, that not only great figures of the past, but also dangerous figures like Hitler could be resurrected on social media and so on. Would your research offer any suggestions on these specific issues?
Yeah, well, again, this is, I mean, my guess is as good as yours, but I clearly, I mean, Facebook is a graveyard of people already. You know, there's a lot of people there who doesn't exist anymore, and you could go there and look at their, a part of their lives. I think I'm too old, so I'm going to have a little bit, but the generation now, they can almost have their entire life recorded and visible. So I think maybe it's already possible that you can Zoom with your granddad who's been dead for 20 years, because, artificial intelligence can make a copy of him in that sense. What I really don't know at this point, is if are we in 10 years, 20 years going to look at artificial intelligence and say, hey, yeah, that was a super good tool that we could like have instant knowledge about anything really fast? Or is this creative intelligence or reasoning intelligence actually going to surpass us in terms of I don't know if I'm hoping or if I'm doubting, but obviously there's a lot of people worried about this. But I also don't think that like people from the history, I have a very hard time to see how you can kind of, I mean, obviously you can learn from the bad. I mean, there is the collective good and there is the collective bad, but that you would kind of evoke a new person like Hitler or something like that. I don't know. It seems maybe unlikely. Could it be personalities on the internet that are kind of evil? Definitely. I mean, I guess there is already. So I mean, it comes a lot to how we can use artificial intelligence to our advantage or to our help as a mankind. So I guess this kind of regulation happening now is very important.
I think in that sense, I think it relativizes a bit like this notion of surpassing, right? It's a bit less about surpassing, but to which uses AI is brought. And in many ways, like, of course, like we have these filters also, right? We don't get pure AI. Like, I don't know if you remember this thing that happened in 2013 or 14 or so when Microsoft started the first chatbot, AI chatbot. And then after just one day, this chatbot started to learn like human racism and so on, right? So it became extremely racist. It became basically like a Hitler in terms of like what it was saying, right? And so like also ChatGPT and so on, all of them have these ethics layers on top, right? We never get to see what AI is actually answering, but only like what an additional ethics layer is like filtering out for us, so that we can get something that this intelligence is not using, like is being used for bad purposes. But anyway, first of all, I want to say in NOMURA sense, also at any point, please jump in if you have like additional questions or like also comments like related to that, because we have a lot of time for like we can open this up a bit also here. And let's then move on to another question. Again, big questions based on your big vision. I have always been wondering if there's any relation between human emotions and desires and the development of intelligence. And I think this is a separate question, will immortal intelligence also develop emotions or desires? But perhaps you could also speak about, because you're like been talking about the risk-taking factor, like what role did emotions and desires play in this thing that happened 60,000 years ago? And then also about the future.
Yeah, I mean, it's of course very, I mean, again, I just want to say that this is just one plausible explanation to why we suddenly migrated out of Africa. But clearly there had to be some radical change to our behavior at that time, which kind of made us very different from any other species in that we, again, could gather in bigger groups, have abstract goals and so on. And then maybe I think this theory about the dopamine receptor and the risk-taking is very interesting. Now I forgot the question, but could you repeat?
About the future of like if immortal intelligence will also develop emotions or desires.
No, I think, you know, if I could restart my life, I would probably, you know, I mean, this series or whatever they call it, like you can communicate with your phone and you can share your thoughts. I think it would be super interesting to have that as an you know artificial friend that you could communicate with and that you can get advice from, and it could evolve. It could give you that helicopter perspective that you frequently lack about yourself, and maybe help you evolve as a better person. So and you know, to what extent AI could have emotion? Yeah, I think they could probably kind of mirror your emotions, but I think it could actually be very kind of supportive for many people to have that function. And I think if it's not already there, it could be like almost like having an, you know, like a classic assistant who always kind of helping you and supporting you and say, hey, maybe not another hamburger today, maybe go out running a little bit. You had 3 hamburgers in a row, like simple things like that. And you know, and that kind of a dialogue. And that would, of course, be the source for making yourself immortal also online, because all the information you're kind of providing to that, to your kind of copy of yourself will then live on forever, I guess. Yeah, so I think some kind of emotion, I don't know how deep they will be, but certainly.
Thank you. I think it also points to this interesting relationship between intelligence and emotions, right? Like your way of framing intelligence here sounds to me is much more based on rationality, on like rational decision making, right? But of course, there's also an important evolutionary function of emotions. Otherwise, we wouldn't have them, right? In the way that we have to steer our behavior as organisms and like our survival as organisms, right? So like, do you have anything to say to that? Like, well, how do emotions, like in the 60s, like maybe based on your research or like how you interpreted all of this, like what is the relationship 60,000 years ago at this important point of emotions in like driving human evolution and intelligence also?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen this movie with dolphins playing in the wave or something. They say, why are they doing that? There is no reason. So they're having fun. So, I mean, I think there are emotions, you know, it's not unique to humans, but I think also, at least, you know, I think emotions or a sense of something is wrong or right comes long before we can rationalize it in logical thoughts. So I think in a way our senses or emotions are supreme to our intellect, because I think most of us like act on emotions and then we try to rationalize them afterwards. And I think that's probably, you know, a strength. And that's kind of part of this intelligence that maybe it's not so easy for artificial intelligence to capture this immediate kind of sense of what's wrong and right or what you want to do.
Thank you. Another question I have here that the person is asking, some people have not had a healthy life, eating too much and do not move. Why do you think we could be immortal? And I think this just points to the question of, could you clarify how you're using this term immortal intelligence also in immortality?
Yeah, I mean, we're not, I guess what we're saying is that what I'm saying is that immortal intelligence is not about having, you know, physical immortality. I mean, of course, there's a lot of things happening there too. You can get a lot of your peripheral organs can be replaced maybe in the future and so on, but the brain, I don't know. So this is more about the fact that humanity as such will continue to evolve in a more artificial way in cyberspace or on computers, if you wish. and copies of your thoughts or your ideas and the person you are will be available, and therefore you come immortal. I have no insights into to what degree we will live longer as mortal humans. That's not what I'm saying.
I see. Another question, controversial question. That's what the person writing this is saying. Evolution beyond DNA capacity, is it always making the DNA-dependent humans better, or not sometimes maybe worse? I mean, does DNA have a self-stability and adjustment function?
Yeah, I think, again, as I said, I don't know about self-stability, but I think it, you know, I mean, we evolved around DNA, and all life on Earth evolved around DNA some 4 billion years ago, and it evolved from bacteria, I guess, and then into very complex, you know, like I guess we are the most complex being on Earth. So I don't think it's going to be if you and it's also resilient in a way that even if we have these extinctions, like 3 of them, I think, where 90% of all life died on Earth, DNA always find a way to find new life, and that's for certain now too. That if we're going to go extinct in a climate change, whatever is going to happen. I mean, we might go extinct as humans, but DNA will survive and will come back on Earth as long as, I think the sun is believed to shine for another 3 billion years. So there is hope for DNA life on Earth. Now I maybe lost the question a little bit, but yeah,
okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I hope the person asking is happy with that answer. It was a short question, so. Thank you so much. Okay, some more. I'm happy we have a lot of interest from the audience. So like if you're still ready, then we have some more here. Okay, one is it's kind of a bit connected to the previous question, but asking from the AI side. There's a risk that the accelerating rate of human progress through the use of AI and other technologies will destroy the social environment and have a negative impact on human society. How should humanity confront this risk?
Oh, wow. I should have put that on the $1 trillion question.
Exactly.
I mean, it's really tricky question. And again, I wouldn't be surprised, you know, if you put a knife against my throat and said, okay, how does thing look in 10 years from now? I think my guess would be, if my life depended on it, that it's going to take a little bit longer than we think before we kind of be surpassed by artificial intelligence. And I think, actually, there is a good chance that we can use it to our good. I mean, in terms of helping with learning and a lot of things that are actually fantastic that we can do with this technology. But of course, there's a lot of hope in that prediction as well, because but I'm not an expert enough to say on artificial intelligence in itself to say how it will affect. I mean, clearly you can see social media is already, you know, in a sense, it was thought to be connecting people across the globe. And now, ironically, it seems to make us less connected. So we're spending time on the internet instead of spending time with each other. So it's very hard to, I mean, obviously that's what artificial intelligence would do probably won't make us interact more, but I think it's very important for mortal intelligence that we do, because as I said again, I think our greatest capacity is when we come together and solve complex problems together.
There's another question that's kind of related to this AI solving problems thing. So far, humans have been the drivers of new inventions. Do you think that role will be taken over by AI in the future? So the ideas will come from AI rather than humanity.
Yeah.
Which speaks to the surpassing aspect that you mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess. I mean, you know, like the climate change. I think probably AI is necessary to solve it. I don't think you know. I don't think we've and now we seem to surpass the kind of, you know, even if we would stop emissions altogether today, we'll still kind of continue. So I think I think like I don't know the answer to this, but kind of speculating. But I know, yeah, I think like for instance, the financial markets for some time has been governed by artificial intelligence or by, you know, like, because if you look, you know, like a few years ago, we had the pandemic, we had the war in Ukraine, and still we see this resilience from the financial markets that they don't crash. I mean, and I think we as humans from the savannah, we are either used to that, either there is a lion or there is no lion. And if there is no lion, fine, we just keep on eating. But if they're lying, we fly and we run as fast as we can. So that kind of behavior is very human. So, and I think AI has the capacity to say that, okay, a war in Ukraine, climate change, not good. But they can also see that, oh, well, it's still like 80% good. So there is I think there might artificial effect can have a balancing effect on our propensity to be very reactive in different situations. If you look at the financial crisis in the 30s, like everyone like runs at the same time at the same direction. So I think maybe that could be a very important part of artificial intelligence as a support to not to make irradical like or too radical decisions.
No more sense. I just want to give you a chance if you have like, anything to add.
It's okay. And I also found some good papers regarding the AI for the understanding that or forecasting climate change in
yeah, I think
the general and so on. So I think this type of advancement will make humans more evolved.
I mean, you have carbon capture. I mean, maybe there is not too far away. I mean, one thing we still can't really fit to our purpose is the climate. I mean, the weather, basically. And maybe that seems far-fetched today, but maybe there is a way for us to actually, you know, control the weather in a way that we can, you know, maybe reflect more sunshine from the earth so we get less heating or something like that. That might seem far away today, but maybe with the speed we are evolving now, maybe in 5 years, it's a possibility or something.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. And one more question that goes in a similar direction, but maybe more like, again, back 60,000 years or maybe also today. So that is about you, because you stressed the importance of the relationship between DNA and the environment and the evolution of humans. And so like this person is asking, which aspect of the environmental change do you think has brought about the biggest like DNA change in human evolution? Or maybe also ongoing. The question is not asked specifically. But,
I don't know, but what I see is that we actually underwent some kind of DNA mutation or epigenetics or something 60,000 years ago. And I don't think we have evolved as humans like DNA wise. We are the same people as we were then, because 60,000 years is not really a long time in evolution. So, but if we look what we achieved since then, you know, it's like, again, impossible inventions that would take DNA-dependent evolution millions and millions of years. It wouldn't even be possible. So if you want to, you know, take home of my lecture of anything is that if we want to understand artificial intelligence and where we are at now, I think we have to have the perspective of what we have done since 60,000 years and look at that evolution, how we first became environmentally independent, and then basically also now are on the brink of being DNA independent and therefore immortal.
Thank you. So one question that is a bit more philosophical in question, but also that sounds interesting to me is this one. We talk from our perspectives as human beings, but it seems to me that this thing called information, that is a form of energy, self-organizes itself to counter the environmental changes. So I'm interested, what will be the final form of structured information? It seems to me that consciousness or DNA is just one form that evolved to counter complicated environmental requirements. So it's a bit philosophical, but like the point is, I think that like you're taking, of course, a human-centered perspective and storyline of human evolution, but right, like you could also take a more global one that is about that sees the human evolution as an expression of evolving forms of information, right? And just one form of that expression. So the question is like how taking this kind of perspective, not a human-centered one, but DNA and like artificial intelligence all being different forms of organization of information that react to changing environments. Like, does that resonate with you in any way?
It's above my pay grade, maybe. I don't know, but it's a little bit hard. But I think, you know, still, I can say this. I don't know if it's relevant to the question, but I can say this. I think still on Earth, DNA is by far the biggest holder of information, right? So you know, for all species and everything, it's there. But you know, increasingly very fast, we're getting a lot of information about, particularly about DNA independent stuff like engines and cameras and what have you, but also about us because we're extracting DNA. So I don't see that information pre-exists or anything that, you know, if you go back 3 billion years ago, the only information we had was in a, you know, theoretically in a bacteria, and that was underneath some ocean, and there was no diversity. But I think I can say, I mean, so DNA has diversified into all the species and all the living things, and I think also maybe that's a possibility for artificial intelligence to in a similar but different way, kind of move into new information spaces or creations that, you know, like I guess we can do things on the computer now, which is impossible to you know, like computer games, for instance. I mean, so that's another type of information that evolves on, you know, in that world. But I don't see any other. I mean, you have to have a source of information, like in computers, it's the chips or the zeros or ones or whatever you have it. And then we have the DNA, and I don't see any. I mean, of course, you can have books, but that's kind of a not so very effective way to keep information. But for me, the information keeping is something about this cross generation, that there should be a mean of transforming information from one generation to another, so you can actually redo exactly, you know, like in science, like you should be able to do the same experiment 20 years later based on the information that you have somewhere. So yeah.
Follow up a bit on that and connect it to something that you said, like, because you said like right up until now DNA is the biggest carrier of information, and then you mentioned the possibility of maybe junk DNA containing something that we don't know about yet, right? Or like contributing to mortal intelligence and that we don't understand yet. Could you just, because we're speaking also to a general audience, could you expand a bit on that? Because I like what I read is also that like there's some doubt about like this junk being actually junk, like for some time, right? Could you connect that a bit?
No, yeah, sure. I mean, we don't know. I mean, the DNA, 99% of the DNA is junk DNA. It doesn't have a function, meaning we have 30,000 genes, which are, you know, the source code, if you wish, for all the proteins. And the proteins make all our tissues and organs and the brain. But so that's why, you know, if you take a big piece of hair and you isolate the DNA, all the information from a piece of my hair, you could actually, it should be in there in the DNA to make, you know, a copy of myself. And that's quite spectacular that, you know, how is this all organized from the fetus, and you have certain cells migrating in this direction, becoming neurons, and, you know, the complexity of a human body, even, you know, with all our parts, and it might be, I mean, it should be beyond the 30,000 genes, right? And it has to do with the regulation. And we know now that a lot of the variants that are carrying risk for complex disease are in this desert. and they loop back and they control the gene expression or something. So gene regulation might be very, very complex, and even that complex, so it could play a role in our intelligence. So I think, and it could be something we really don't appreciate today. I don't know. Or as my colleague and dear friend Eric says, we're all in an imaginary big game, and it's all, there is a level of intelligence, not really in our body or in the DNA, but in space somewhere that we really don't appreciate as yet. That could also be an explanation. I don't know if he would appreciate how I put that.
There was one question about space traveling that I also saw earlier.
Was it Elon Musk?
Yeah.
Is he?
Oh, maybe I'm not finding it. Also, okay, this is again, like, it's about space traveling, but the role of AI in this. So, and this one person here is saying that I heard that some professor of robotics at Osaka University has the thesis that mortal intelligence needs AI for space exploration, because yeah, you said 93 billion light years and so on, of course. And then another thing, extraterrestrials may be time-space travelers. Some experts believe that they're sent to visit their makers. The mortal intelligence is shown also in various science fiction movies. It's a bit speculative, of course, but like perhaps that one part of the question, which is about the relationship of AI and space traveling, perhaps, or the necessity.
Yeah,
for
no, I mean, it's just simply that we die in a heartbeat. It's very fast. 100 years is very, or I mean, 80, 90 years. So we that's a limit for our next horizon, which obviously we can see very clearly now is space travel, although we're aiming for the moon still. And but you know, we also, people are looking with this telescopes, and they're finding Earth that are perfectly situated close to the sun or something that should maybe sustain our life. But then they say, well, it's only 500 light years away or something like that. And it's, I mean, light years means the distance light, which has a speed of 582 kilometers per second, I think, travels in a year. So just for people who doesn't know what the light year is, it's just amazing. One light year is a very long distance. So and also there is a problem, as I think Eric pointed out, we don't have the combustion engines to shoot ourselves out in the space. So there's a lot of things that are challenging. But if we do, it seems like we could harbor our intelligence, mortal intelligence, in a form of artificial intelligence that drive the machine and travels, you know, with us. And then when we reach that planet someday, maybe we could seed it with our embryos, or maybe with the bacterial DNA or something. You know, that's the simplistic view that you can kind of imagine now, but maybe there's going to be much more to it than that.
So this reminds me of a book I recently read, which I found very interesting, called Biocivilizations. I don't know if you heard of it. Then you look at the science of life by Predrag Slijepčević. And in this, he takes a completely non-human centered perspective, kind of saying that life is, of course, based on bacterial life, or microorganistic life.
Yeah.
And that in many ways, like a human-centered perspective, like you're taking, saying like the humans are like the pinnacle of evolution in a way, and do something that like other forms of life cannot. He's taking a more integrated perspective, saying like humans have always been, of course, part of the environment and ecosystems and so on. And in many ways, bacterial life forms have had civilizations, have had art, have had science, based on DNA, of course, in the way that you're describing this difference, you know, like based on DNA versus DNA independent art and science in life, of course. But in many ways that we are also just like carriers of microbiomes and so on, like without which we couldn't live. And that we could also take the perspective that like bacteria, in a way, using humans and other life forms to spread themselves, right? Even to space now, as you were suggesting. Like, what do you like? Do you have any?
I mean, no, I think I must say, I think human is unique. What I tried to push in my talk is this thing of choice. You know, we are making choices, like, and they matter, those choices. And I think, should we go, should I stay? That maybe how it started with this. And we have debates, and therefore we're doing all these different things. Whereas all other species that I know, they stick to what they do, and they don't, they stick to their environment as we used to do, and then of course we are dependent on bacterial microbiome for sure, and it probably influence our mental health and everything. But I still would say that human clearly sticks out. But that said, if we now will go distinct due to climate disaster or something, I don't know about the dinosaurs, how smart they were, but there were some that were really smart. I think I'm sure there's going to evolve a new species, which might be totally different, maybe rats or bacteria that at some point in their evolution might be thinking logically or making choices like we do. But I think it's kind of unique still that, again, that's what I'm so fascinated about this time point 60,000 years ago, because we really, at that was a critical point where we separate ourselves as a species from all the other species at that point, I think. And nothing has changed since then, I think, in our thinking, although, yeah. I
see. Thank you. I think it's slowly time to wrap up. I wanted to ask with a last question, because which is about the policy relevance. And I'm just reading the question. Thank you for the lecture. I resonate with art, belief, and science being the keys to master and sustain the environment. In the state of planetary boundaries, multilateral entities such as the United Nations, which stress the global commons and public good, but many governments need to take care of their national interests. How has your research impacted policymaking globally, regionally, or nationally? Or maybe it's not also just about your research has impacted because you're working on cardiovascular disease, more like this kind of topic, like how is it connected to policy?
No, I don't. I mean, I think we're trying to figure this out, and my contribution, simple contribution, I've only been, again, what I do is Seitaro here. We work on cardiovascular disease, like so. But I think Eric and I want to bring this, and I thought this was a public lecture and more interesting to talk about this than some atherosclerosis. So I think it's important to better understand artificial intelligence as we, how it will impact us. I think we need to have a better perspective of our evolution last 60,000 years, and I would love to hear like what people think about what I'm saying and how that could affect these kind of issues and how it could help us to, I don't know, regulate but live together with artificial intelligence. And be cautious about what it can do in terms of evil as well. I don't know, but maybe some people out there who's actually spending their whole livelihood on human evolution could be inspired or think something new from this lecture, I hope.
Thank you so much. I wanted to give Professor NOMURA a last chance for a last comment or reaction.
I'm very happy to be here to hear your talk and token answers. And we are conducting genomic analysis and omics analysis using human samples and animal models and so on to develop new therapies and so on. What I am interested in your talk is you perform not only DNA research, but also DNA dependent evolution and DNA independent evolution and so on. With your talk, we would like to use the collective good and individual curiosity to harmonize them to develop immortal intelligence and our research progress.
That's a very good point, because I think, if I can comment this quickly, it's like when I grew up as a PhD student, there was these professors who kind of tortured you with, don't you know Carlson and Carlson from 72? Didn't you read that paper? And I think we can evolve from, I think it still is important with knowledge and reading and so on, but we can actually evolve quite a lot as humans, because we don't need to learn so much, by heart. We can have this immediate support of perfect knowledge. And therefore, that I think it gives us more space for our curiosity and be more, both curious and more critical to what we do in science. And I think also now science, as many areas of expertise, they fall into this. There are cycles of what is important to actually do science about. I mean, what are the important scientific questions to solve? And I think there also it could be like, okay, for the well-being of Japanese people, this is the question that you need to spend time on solving. And that is something I think artificial intelligence can come up with soon. So sorry, maybe heart disease is not a problem, so you're out of work. But you see what I mean? That artificial intelligence, because now it's a prerogative for the professor to say, I think this question is really important. And then, he gets a grant and he spends his life on that. But really, maybe we should start looking at what are the critical questions for mankind to solve. And, and obviously research should be free and so on. So there is a debate around that too. But I think that could be very interesting to also both give more space to curiosity, but also be more critical about the kind of things we're actually doing science about.
Great. Then, yeah, thank you so much for opening up some of those critical questions for mankind, Professor BJÖRKEGREN, in this lecture. And thank you also, Professor NOMURA, for your comments and contributions. And also thanks everyone who joined us in the audience for their contributions and questions. And with that, I would like to close today's lecture, and I hope to see you again at the next Tokyo College lecture. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.